The ballroom lights of the hotel were blinding. I was hiding in a corner, mechanically shoveling mini cupcakes into my mouth and counting the balloons hanging from the ceiling. As one of the most invisible programmers at Nexus Innovations, this whole holiday gala was my own personal social hell. And now for the grand prize drawing, the MC's voice sliced through my thoughts. Let's see who our lucky winner is this year. The numbers on the massive screen began to scroll, and my heart inexplicably started to race along with them. The grand prize was an all-expenses-paid trip for two to St. Bart's. I prayed I'd win, even though I didn't even own a passport. And the winner is, from the engineering department, Leo Evans. I coughed out a mouthful of cupcake crumbs. The heads of my colleagues swiveled in my direction like 100 synchronized owls. Someone started clapping. Someone else gave me a shove. I stood up mechanically, my legs feeling like they were filled with lead. "Mr. Evans, come on up to the stage," the MC beckoned enthusiastically. I stumbled through the crowd, feeling like a deer in the headlights. I nearly tripped on my own shoelaces climbing the stairs, which drew a ripple of good-natured laughter from the audience. When I finally made it to the stage, the MC shook my hand warmly. "Congratulations, Leo, and as our grand prize winner, you get an extra surprise." I blinked, completely bewildered. An extra surprise? I just wanted to grab the travel voucher and retreat to the safety of my cubicle. Let's give a warm welcome to the CEO of Nexus Innovations, who will be presenting the award. What? The CEO? I've been at the company for 3 years and couldn't even pick our CTO out of a lineup. Now I was supposed to meet the legendary CEO? The rumor was she was a total shark, the Iron Queen, who had acquired our company and laid off 30% of the staff in her first 3 months. The spotlight suddenly swung to the other side of the stage, and a tall figure emerged, walking with an easy grace. When she stepped into the light, my jaw nearly hit the floor. So, my girlfriend, or at least the woman I thought was my girlfriend, was walking toward me in a sharply tailored black pantsuit and heels, radiating an aura of absolute power. We'd been dating for a year, and she'd always told me she was a mid-level marketing manager, that her constant overtime and business trips were just for urgent projects. Now she stood under the spotlight, and the entire ballroom had fallen silent. "Darling," she whispered in my ear, her voice for my ears only. Surprise. Then, in front of the entire company, she kissed me. My brain completely shut down. All I could hear was a low buzzing and the faint, scattered gasps of my coworkers. Sarah, no, Ms. Vance, turned to face the stunned audience, her voice clear and strong. "I'd like to take this opportunity to announce that Leo Evans is being promoted to head of special projects, reporting directly to me. I'm confident his technical skills and innovative thinking will bring a new breakthroughs to this company." A wave of whispers rippled through the crowd. I just stood there, feeling like a scarecrow that had been struck by lightning. My girlfriend was the boss. Did I get the wrong script for my life? Sarah squeezed my hand, her voice a low murmur. "Breathe, honey. You look like you've seen a ghost." You're the CEO." I managed to choke out. She said, the corner of her mouth twitching. "And by the way, all those times you complain about upper management?" I kept notes. In that moment, my soul well and truly left my body. I was staring at the ceiling, having counted 387 imaginary sheep, when my phone alarm blared. For 15 a.m. I peeled myself out of bed like a zombie, my head feeling like it was full of wet cement. "First day as head of special projects. You got this," I said to the dark circles staring back at me from the mirror. My voice was as raspy as sandpaper. A cold shower shocked me back to some semblance of consciousness. I dug out my most formal shirt, the one I bought for my cousin's wedding last year, the cuffs already starting to fray. I wrestled my tie into a crooked knot that looked like a dying snake. A text from Sarah popped up. "Maya has your first meeting scheduled for 5. Don't be late." She was my old assistant. "She doesn't like you, so watch your back." I sent back a single. "She requested a transfer after she found out about us," Sarah added. "She probably thinks you're going to replace her." I rolled my eyes at the phone. Replace her? All I wanted was to go back to my little cubicle, write my code, and stay a million miles away from this kind of office politics. I got to the tech campus by Uber at exactly 4:55 a.m. The sprawling complex was eerily quiet, the only light coming from the security kiosk. The guard's eyebrows shot up to his hairline when he saw me. "Leo." "Sir," he stammered, clearly not used to my new, unearned status. "Just Leo is fine," I said, my stomach twisting as I swiped my ID badge. This was all just too absurd. The elevator shot up to the 32nd floor. The lights in the conference room were already on, and a woman with a high ponytail stood with her back to the door, arranging files. She turned at the sound of the door. Her face was set in a perfect professional smile. "Mr. Evans, you're punctual," she said, extending a hand. "I'm Maya Lin. I'll be coordinating the schedule for the special projects team." Her hand was as cold as a corpse. I noticed a faint twitch at the corner of her eye. The smile was flawless, but her eyes looked like they wanted to nail me to the wall. "You can call me Leo," I said. "What's so urgent? We need a meeting at 5 in the morning." "Coordinating with the overseas team," she said dismissively, handing me a thick stack of papers. "This is the technical proposal from our Singapore division. They're waiting for your feedback." I flipped through the document, and the dense wall of technical jargon immediately sobered me up. The last revision was time-stamped at 2:43 a.m. "When do they need the feedback?" "Before 6, Maya said with that same icy smile. "Ms. Vance specifically stressed the importance of this project." I stared at her for a solid 3 seconds. This was definitely a trap. But Sarah had said no one in the company knew the real nature of our relationship, so I had to play the part of a competent employee. "Fine. I need a computer. One has been prepared for you," she said, gesturing to a laptop in the corner. "Coffee's over there." The next 45 minutes felt like a flashback to finals week in college. 3 black coffees later, I finished typing up the evaluation report with 1 minute to spare. When Maya took the file, a flicker of genuine surprise crossed her face. "Is there a problem?" I asked. "No," she said, her professional mask back in place. "I just didn't realize you were so knowledgeable about quantum encryption." "It was the topic of my senior thesis," I said, standing up and stretching my neck, which cracked loudly. "Any other meetings?" "At 10 o'clock, a technical review with the CTO, Marcus Thorne," she said. "You can wait in the lounge outside, Miss Vance's office. It's quieter there." The lounge outside Sarah's office was indeed quiet as a museum exhibit. Leather sofas, modern art on the walls, and a floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the entire city. I collapsed onto a sofa, feeling like I'd been unwillingly cast in a reality show about the rich and powerful. My phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. "You alive?" "Barely. Maya Lin is trying to kill me." "She gave you the Singapore encryption proposal?" "Yep. 6 a.m. Deadline." "It took my best tech team 3 months to crack that proposal," Sarah replied. "How'd you do it?" I was about to type my response when I heard footsteps. I quickly locked my phone. Sarah walked in, dressed in that same familiar black power suit, flanked by a few other executives. She gave me a brief, professional nod as she passed. "Leo, are you prepared for the 10 o'clock meeting?" "Yes, Ms. Vance," I said, standing up like a student summoned by the principal. As she walked by, her fingers brushed against the back of my hand, so quickly it might have been my imagination. A jolt of electricity shot up my spine from the point of contact. The meeting that followed felt like a carefully staged play. Marcus Thorne, the company CTO, a man in his early 40s with a receding hairline, bombarded me with a relentless assault of technical jargon. I had to summon every last brain cell just to keep up with his pace. "So you're suggesting our entire data lake architecture is fundamentally flawed?" Marcus asked, his eyes narrowing. The room fell silent. I realized this was a test. Everyone was looking at me, including Sarah. She was leaning back in her chair, her expression unreadable. "Not flawed," I heard myself say. "Overdesigned. We're dealing with user behavior data, not nuclear launch codes. The 16 layers of encryption you designed are like using a bank vault to store marshmallows. It's secure, but it's completely unnecessary." There was a moment of silence. Then, Marcus Thorne suddenly burst out laughing. "Well said," he exclaimed, slapping the table. "I like a guy who gets straight to the point." After the meeting, a couple of the tech leads came over and asked for my contact info. It seemed I had survived the first round of trials. During my lunch break, I was hiding in a fire escape, eating a sandwich when the door creaked open. Sarah slipped inside. The fire escape. Really? She said, snatching my sandwich and taking a bite. Is this how the CEO's boyfriend gets treated? You almost gave me a heart attack, I hissed, keeping my voice low. Why didn't you tell me you were the CEO sooner? And what would have happened if I had? She countered, tilting her head. Would you have debated with Marcus Thorne as naturally as you just did? Or would you have been so nervous you'd pee your pants every time you had a meeting? I couldn't argue with that. If I had known who she was, I probably would have stammered through her dates. You did well today, she said suddenly, her fingers toying with my horribly knotted tie. Though your tie-tying skills are atrocious. Maya hates me. She hates anyone who gets close to me, Sarah said, straightening my collar. Don't worry about her. She's all bark and no bite. That encryption proposal was a trap, she confirmed with a nod. But you navigated it perfectly. Marcus is impressed, and that's important. Why? She was about to answer when her phone rang. She glanced at the screen, and her expression instantly sharpened. I have to go, she said, giving me a quick peck on the lips. Dinner tonight. Meet me in the parking garage at 7. Before I could reply, she pushed the door open and was gone, the sound of her heels echoing down the hallway. I spent the rest of the day aimlessly wandering around my new office. It was more of a glass-walled cage, really, with the blinds permanently half open. People kept peeking in as they walked by. I felt like the new monkey at the zoo. When the workday ended, I headed down to the parking garage as planned. Sarah's black Mercedes was already waiting in a dimly lit corner. The door unlocked as I approached. Get in, she said, her eyes fixed on the rearview mirror. I had barely fastened my seatbelt when the car shot forward. Sarah drove like she ran her company, fast, ruthless, and with no room for error. We're being followed, she said curtly. I twisted around to look out the back window. Sure enough, a gray sedan was tailing us closely. Who? Not sure, she said, wrenching the steering wheel. The car swerved into a narrow alley. Hold on. The next 5 minutes were straight out of an action movie. Sarah weaved through the labyrinth of alleys, narrowly missing walls several times. The gray sedan stayed glued to our tail. Just as we were about to merge back onto a main road, a white van suddenly cut us off from the side. Brace yourself, Sarah yelled, slamming on the brakes. With a screech of tortured tires, the two vehicles boxed us in. 3 masked men jumped out of the gray sedan, holding something in their hands. Get down, Sarah shouted, shoving my head down. The driver's side window suddenly spiderwebbed. A silenced pistol. My heart was about to beat out of my chest. Sarah had already pulled a black handgun from the glove compartment. Stay in the car, she commanded, her voice terrifyingly calm. Before I could process what was happening, she pushed the door open, rolling out just as a second shot shattered the space where her head had been. I watched, stunned, as she returned fire, her movements as fluid as a movie stunt double's. One of the masked men crumpled to the ground. The other 2 split up. One of them suddenly rushed toward my side of the car. On pure instinct, I kicked my door open, slamming into his knee. The man cried out in pain. I seized the opportunity, lunging at him, and using a judo throw I'd learned in a college club to slam him to the pavement. Leo, Sarah yelled. I looked up just in time to see the third attacker raising his gun, aiming at Sarah's back. Without thinking, I grabbed a loose brick from the ground and hurled it. It hit the man's wrist with a sickening crunch, and his gun clattered to the ground. The sound of police sirens grew closer. The remaining attackers quickly retreated, dragging their injured accomplice into the van and speeding away. Sarah ran back to my side, cupping my face in her hands. Are you okay? You know how to use a gun? I asked, my voice trembling. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, marksman champion, and I took a few Krav Maga classes, she said, quickly checking me for injuries. The real question is you. Where did you learn that move? College judo club. I panted, still trying to catch my breath. I took second place in the nationals. Sarah stared at me for a few seconds, then burst out laughing. My little programmer knows how to fight. There's a lot you don't know about me, I muttered, my legs still shaking. The police arrived and took a brief statement. Sarah downplayed the incident, suggesting it was likely intimidation from a business competitor and declining to press for a further investigation. The drive back to her place was silent. It wasn't until we were showered and lying in bed that a question surfaced in my mind. Who were those people? Why did they attack us? Sarah lay with her back to me, her shoulders tense. I don't know, but I'm going to find out. I reached out and turned her to face me, seeing an emotion in her eyes I had never seen before: fear, anger, a mixture of both. Tell me the truth, I said softly. This has something to do with you suddenly going public with our relationship, doesn't it? She was quiet for a long time before finally letting out a sigh. Maybe. I need some time to confirm a few things. I'm your boyfriend, not your employee, I said, taking her hand. Don't keep me in the dark. Sarah hesitated, a rare sight, before finally nodding. Give me 3 days. If my theory is right, I'll tell you everything. I held her as she fell asleep that night, half dreaming, half awake. Just before I drifted off, I heard her whisper, I'm sorry I dragged you into this. Chapter 3. The unveiling plot. 3 days later, I was sprawled on the Italian sofa in Sarah's apartment. A piece of furniture that cost more than my last 6 months' rent, poring over a stack of encrypted financial documents. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting bright patches on the papers. My eyes ached. Sarah emerged from the bedroom barefoot, her hair casually tied up in a ponytail, wearing one of my old college t-shirts. It was infinitely more charming than any of her designer power suits. She handed me one of the 2 mugs of coffee she was carrying. See anything? She asked, settling on the sofa next to me, a faint scent of shower gel clinging to her. I pushed a document toward her, pointing to several highlighted lines. These cash flows are weird. On the surface, they're payments to outsourced development teams, but the recipients are all shell corporations. Sarah's lips curved into a slight smile. Go on. And the timing is suspicious, I said, flipping to another page. Every time there's a large transfer, the company's stock mysteriously dips within a week, then quickly rebounds. Short selling, Sarah said, taking a sip of coffee. Someone is using inside information to manipulate our stock. I frowned. That would require cooperation from someone at the executive level. Who do you suspect? Sarah put her mug down and pulled a photograph from a drawer in the coffee table, sliding it in front of me. It was a picture of her, with several middle-aged men and women in suits at some ribbon-cutting ceremony. Recognize him? She asked, pointing to a man on the far right with graying temples and a kind smile. I shook my head. Arthur Vance. My uncle, the company's former CEO. Sarah's voice turned cold. And my legal guardian until I turned 18. I caught the strange tone in her voice. You two aren't on good terms. Sarah's fingers traced the rim of her mug. After my parents died in a car crash, he took over the company and became my guardian. To the world, he was the benevolent uncle. Behind closed doors. She paused. It doesn't matter. What matters is that I suspect he's colluding with Marcus Thorne, embezzling company funds through fake projects and shorting the stock. Do you have proof? Not enough to make it stick, Sarah said, shaking her head. Which is why I need your help. I put down my coffee, a sudden understanding dawning on me. So, you going public with our relationship was a way to flush them out, Sarah said, looking me directly in the eye. If I suddenly had a serious partner, and that partner was given an unprecedented promotion, I knew they wouldn't be able to sit still. A wave of discomfort washed over me as I realized I'd been used as bait. You had a plan all along, and you didn't tell me. I needed your reactions to be genuine, Sarah said, a rare hint of apology in her voice. If I told you beforehand, do you think you could have acted so convincingly in front of Marcus? I thought back to Marcus Thorne's scrutinizing gaze during the tech meeting, and my stomach clenched. It wasn't a test for a newcomer. It was an assessment of a potential threat. What's the plan now? I asked. Sarah leaned in, so close I could count her eyelashes. We need to sell it even harder. Her breath, a mix of bitter coffee and cool mint, brushed against my cheek. My heart hammered against my ribs. What do you mean? I mean, she whispered, starting today, you need to act like my spoiled, doting boyfriend, the kind who's high on love. Glance at me a little too often in meetings. Bring me coffee after lunch. Be a little too familiar in front of our colleagues. I don't think that's a good idea. The office is for work. That's exactly the right reaction, Sarah smiled. Innocent and upright. The perfect persona. They'll be convinced you are just some love-struck programmer who's in over his head. I swallowed hard. And then they'll approach you. Sarah's eyes sharpened. They'll try to either bribe you or threaten you. Either way, they'll show their hand. I was silent for a moment. The plan sounded both dangerous and thrilling, completely out of place for a 9-to-5 programmer like me. But looking at Sarah's expectant gaze, I found I couldn't refuse. "All right," he sighed. "But I have conditions." "Name them." "First, you have to tell me in advance about anything that could put my life in danger." "Agreed." "Second, no matter what happens, no more hiding things from me." Sarah hesitated for a beat, then nodded. "Okay." "And third," I said, suddenly pulling her closer, "if we're going to be acting, we need to rehearse." Before she could react, I kissed her. It started as a playful prank, but it quickly deepened into something more serious. Sarah was surprised at first, then responded with even more passion. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathless. "Not bad for a rehearsal," Sarah said, licking her lips. "It seems you have a lot of skills I don't know about." My face flushed, and I quickly changed the subject. "So Marcus Thorne is the key?" "Yes," Sarah said, straightening the collar I had rumpled. "He's in charge of the entire tech division, including all data security. The digital footprints of those fraudulent transactions couldn't have been covered up so well without his help. Why not just fire him? It would tip them off." Sarah shook her head. "I need to catch them all in one net, including the mastermind, my uncle." I noticed her fingers tighten unconsciously when she said the word uncle. There was clearly more to that story, but now wasn't the time to ask. "What I need to do? Just act normal at work, but start paying close attention to details related to data security," Sarah said. "Marcus will probably test you, give you access to sensitive systems. Accept it, but don't seem too eager." This sounds like a spy movie. "Welcome to my world," Sarah said, standing up and pulling me to my feet. "Now, let's go to the office and continue the show. Remember, you're the CEO's spoiled new boyfriend. You're allowed to be a little cocky." "That's not my personality. That's why it's called acting," she said, pinching my cheek. "By the way, you look cute today." My ears turned bright red. Sarah laughed and walked toward the master closet, leaving me standing in the living room, my heart still beating an unsteady rhythm. 2 hours later, we arrived at the office separately. As planned, I walked an iced Americano, her favorite, to her desk in full view of the entire executive floor. "Ms. Vance, your coffee," I said, deliberately raising my voice as I placed the cup on her desk. Sarah didn't even look up. "Too much sugar." "You haven't even tried it," I said, feigning hurt. "Because I know you." She finally looked up, her eyes glinting with amusement. "The same way I know my golden retriever." A few eavesdropping colleagues suppressed their chuckles. I put on a convincing display of embarrassment, ducking my head and walking away quickly. The performance was flawless. At lunchtime, as I was waiting in line in the cafeteria, Marcus Thorne suddenly appeared behind me. "How's the new role treating you, kid?" he asked in a friendly tone, like a senior mentor checking in on protege. "It's going well. Thanks for asking, Marcus," I replied, playing the part of a bright-eyed newcomer. "The boss has high expectations for you," he said, his tone heavy with meaning. "The special projects team. Very mysterious." I pretended not to understand the implication. "I'll do my best." Marcus smiled, then lowered his voice. "Actually, I have a technical problem I wanted your opinion on. Something to do with data encryption. You have time to chat?" The fish was on the hook. My internal alarms were screaming, but on the outside, I looked flattered and surprised. "Of course. Anything I can do to help." "Tonight, 7 o'clock. Data Center B, Sublevel 2, he said. "It's quiet there. We won't be disturbed." "Great. I'll be there." Marcus clapped me on the shoulder and walked away with his tray. I noticed his fingers were trembling slightly. Was it nerves or excitement? I immediately sent an encrypted text to Sarah. Fish took the bait. "Tonight, 7 p.m., DCB2. Her reply was swift. "Be careful. He has the authority to disable the surveillance cameras in there." It was obviously a trap, but we had no other choice. For the rest of the afternoon, I ran through every possible scenario and contingency. Just before quitting time, Sarah called me into her office and, in front of several senior managers, affectionately straightened my tie. "Working late tonight?" she asked, her voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "Yeah, got a technical issue to sort out." I played along. "Don't be too late," she said, squeezing my earlobe. "I'll wait up for you." The executives exchanged glances. Our little drama was getting bolder. At 6:50 p.m., I headed to Building B alone. The auxiliary building housed servers and equipment and was mostly deserted after hours. The elevator descended to the second sublevel, and when the doors opened, the hallway lights flickered, casting an eerie, ominous glow. Marcus was already waiting at the data center door, holding 2 key cards. Punctual. I like that, he said, swiping a card to open the door. Come on in. I've got something interesting to show you. Inside, rows of server racks hummed with a low, constant drone. Marcus led me to a small, isolated cubicle at the far end of the room, containing only a desk and 2 monitors. Have a seat, he gestured. The moment I sat down, Marcus slid a photograph across the desk. It was a picture of Sarah and me kissing on her balcony last night. My blood ran cold. You're very photogenic, Marcus said with a smirk. What do you think would happen if this picture suddenly appeared on the company's internal network? I forced myself to remain calm. Marcus, what is this? Don't be nervous, he said, waving a hand dismissively. I just want to be your friend. So, she's not as simple as she seems. She's using you, just like she uses everyone else. We're just in a normal relationship, I said, feigning naivety. Marcus laughed. A relationship? Do you know what happened to her last 2 assistants? The first one had a nervous breakdown and was hospitalized. The second one has been missing for 3 months. He leaned closer. She's a dangerous woman, Leo, and I can protect you. Ow! I played along. It's simple, Marcus said, pulling up an interface on one of the monitors. This is a backdoor into the company's core database. Sarah reviews the financial reports every Friday night. If you could help me, adjust a few numbers before she sees them. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding like a drum. They wanted to directly tamper with the financial data. Why me? Because you have the access, and you won't arouse suspicion, Marcus smiled. And the compensation, of course, will be generous. Enough for you to leave this city and start a new life. I pretended to think for a moment. I need some time to consider it. Of course, Marcus said, handing me a business card. My phone is on 24/7, but don't take too long. I need an answer before Friday. By the time I left the data center, my shirt was soaked with cold sweat. I had just reached the elevator bay when my phone vibrated. It was a text from Sarah. Come to the parking garage. Now. The elevator doors had barely opened when a hand grabbed me and pulled me into a car. Sarah's face was a mask of cold fury as she stomped on the gas and peeled out of the garage. What did he show you? She demanded. I told her everything, including the photograph and the proposal to alter the data. After I finished, Sarah wrenched the steering wheel, and the car screeched to a halt on the side of the road. The photo, she hissed through gritted teeth. They've been watching my apartment. What do we do now? I asked. He needs an answer by Friday. Sarah turned to me, her eyes filled with a complex emotion. Why are you helping me? Marcus is right. I am dangerous. You could take his money and disappear. I hadn't expected her to ask that. Why was I doing this? Because she was the CEO? Because of our act? Or because? Because I trust you, I said finally. And I hesitated. I'm not just acting. Sarah's eyes shimmered in the dim light of the car. We stared at each other for a few seconds, a silent understanding passing between us. 3 days from now, she finally said, her voice firm and resolute. It will all be over. But before that, I need you to do one more thing. ####, Chapter 4. The deepening shadows at 3:17 a.m., my eyes snapped open. In the darkness, an instinct I didn't know I possessed flowed down my spine like ice water. I held my breath, listening intently. The apartment was dead silent, except for the occasional hum of the refrigerator. But something was wrong. I quietly reached for my phone on nightstand, unlocked it with my thumb, and immediately pulled up my security camera app. The screen's blue light was harsh in the dark. The app showed all 4 cameras were green, no alarms triggered. Just as I was about to put the phone down, a sliver of reflected light from under my bedroom door caught my eye. The angle was wrong for my hardwood floors. I silently slid out of bed, grabbing a baseball bat from the back of my closet, a souvenir from my college team days. The sound of the doorknob turning was almost imperceptible. I flattened myself against the wall, my own heartbeat so loud I thought it would shatter my eardrums. The door swung open. and a dark figure slipped inside. I swung the bat. "It's me," a familiar voice said as my wrist was caught in an iron grip. "So, I flicked on the bedside lamp and saw her dressed head to toe in black, a mask pulled down around her neck. "What the hell are you doing?" "Testing your situational awareness," she said, her expression serious. "You failed. I've been inside for 5 minutes." I then noticed her gloves and shoe covers, as professional as a cat burglar's. "Couldn't you have just rung the doorbell?" "A real intruder wouldn't," she said, scanning the room. "Your security system is pathetic. The cameras are all fixed angle, and the alarm can be bypassed with a simple magnet." I rubbed my temples, trying to will away the sleep. "So you broke into my apartment in the middle of the night to give me a home security lecture?" Sarah didn't answer. Instead, she walked over to my desk and began examining my computer. "Someone's been here." "What?" "The angle of your keyboard is off, and your mouse pad has been shifted slightly," she said, pointing to the monitor. "And your computer has been accessed." The gravity of the situation finally hit me. "Wait, you're saying someone actually broke into my apartment?" "It's highly likely," Sarah said, pulling a small device from her pocket and scanning my computer's ports. "There are microscopic scratches on the USB port. Someone plugged something in." My stomach clenched. Marcus? Or the people behind him? What were they looking for? "Is anything missing?" Sarah asked. I did a quick check. Wallet, laptop, phone are all here. "Wait." I pulled open a desk drawer where a single thumb drive lay. "This USB drive I left here yesterday. Anything important on it?" "No, it's blank," I said, picking it up. A thought struck me. "Wait a minute. I'm positive I left this drive at the office." Sarah's eyes lit up. "A decoy?" "Yeah, I copied a few junk files onto it." I frowned. "But why would they put it back?" "They scanned it, realized it was useless, and returned it to avoid tipping you off," Sarah said, placing the drive into a small evidence bag. "A clever move that backfired." I sat on the edge of the bed, a wave of fear washing over me. They could come back at any time, couldn't they? "Yes," Sarah said, finally pulling off her gloves. "Pack a bag. You're staying with me." Now, she said, already starting to stuff my clothes into a backpack. "And by the way, starting tomorrow, I'm teaching you basic self-defense and counter-surveillance." At 4 a.m., I was in the passenger seat of Sarah's car, a backpack containing all my worldly possessions on my lap. The city was asleep, the streetlights like strings of glowing pearls in the darkness. "Why the sudden urgency?" I asked. "Because of the photo?" Sarah's fingers tapped a nervous rhythm on the steering wheel. "Because Marcus met with David Chen today." "The CFO?" "Yes. At my uncle's private club." Sarah's profile was illuminated by the passing streetlights. "They're getting desperate." Sarah's apartment was in a fortress-like luxury tower downtown. The elevator required an iris scan, and 2 uniformed security guards stood sentinel at the lobby desk. The first thing she did when we walked through her door was retrieve a black handgun from a lockbox in the hall closet and check the magazine. "Do you know how to use one of these?" she asked. "I shot a rifle once during a college RDC weekend. 5 shots, barely hit the paper." Sarah sighed. "Special training starts tomorrow." The next morning, she woke me up by slapping a freezing cold washcloth on my face. "Up and at him, soldier," she said, already dressed in a sports bra and shorts, her hair in a high ponytail. 3-mile run for a warm-up. The next 2 hours were pure hell. Running, push-ups, sit-ups. When I was finally lying on a yoga mat like a beach fish, Sarah announced it was time for the fun part. "Basic self-defense," she said, standing over me. "Assume I'm an attacker, choking you from behind." She moved in a blur, her forearm clamping around my throat like an iron bar. I instinctively clawed at her arm, but it was useless. "Wrong," she said, her breath warm against my neck. "Don't pull. First, tuck your chin to protect your windpipe. Second, drop your center of gravity to unbalance your opponent. Third." Her instruction was professional and detached, but every point of physical contact sent a jolt of electricity through me. When we were practicing ground escape techniques, she straddled my waist, and my brain nearly short-circuited. "Focus," she said, pinching my cheek. "The enemy isn't going to go easy on you just because you're distracted. You're more distracting than any enemy," I muttered, tried to ignore the pressure of her thighs against my hips. After the training session, we were both drenched in sweat. Sarah tossed me a bottle of water and leaned against the wall, catching her breath. The morning sun filtered through the blinds, illuminating the beads of sweat that trickled down her collarbone and into her tank top. I forced myself to look away. "You're a fast learner," she commented. "You're in better shape than you look." "College track team," I said, twisting the cap off the bottle. "So what's the plan for today?" "Business as usual, but keep a close eye on Marcus and David Shun," she said, heading toward the bathroom. "I'm going to grab a shower, then we'll head to the office together." After the sound of the shower started, my phone vibrated. It was an encrypted message from an unknown number. "Be careful in the elevator. Don't ride alone today." I stared at the screen, the hairs on my arms standing on end. Was it a warning or a trap? Who sent it? I debated telling Sarah, but the bathroom door opened and she emerged, wrapped in a towel, her hair dripping. "What's wrong?" she asked, noticing my expression. I showed her the message. Sarah frowned, quickly dried her hands, and pulled up the building security feed on her tablet. "The elevator did undergo routine maintenance in the middle of the night," she said with a cold smirk. "Looks like someone wanted to stage an accident. So we take the stairs." "No, we take the elevator." Sarah's eyes turned dangerous. "But we take precautions." An hour later, we were standing in front of the elevator. Sarah was in a power suit and heels, while I clutched a thick stack of files. A security guard pushed the button for us. "Thanks, we've got it from here," Sarah said with a polite smile. The guard nodded and walked away. As soon as the doors closed, Sarah pulled a small device from her purse and attached it to the control panel. A green light began to blink. "Signal jammer," she explained. "If someone tries to stop the elevator mid-descent, this will buy us 30 seconds. The elevator descended smoothly. Then, around the 25th floor, it shuddered violently and the lights flickered. Sarah immediately slammed the emergency stop button, but nothing happened. The elevator continued to fall, its speed noticeably increasing. "Hold on," she yelled, simultaneously pulling a strange device from her bag and slapping it onto the elevator ceiling. With a deafening screech of metal on metal, the elevator jolted to a halt at the 18th floor. The doors were pried open to reveal the horrified faces of two security guards. "Ms. Vance, are you all right? The elevator just lost control." "I'm fine," Sarah said, calmly straightening her suit jacket. "Please have the engineering department conduct a full diagnostic on all elevators. And pull the surveillance footage from this morning. I want to know who authorized that routine maintenance." As we walked away, she whispered to me, "See, they're making their move." At the office, everything seemed normal, but an invisible tension hung in the air. Maya Lin's eyes flickered with a strange emotion when she saw us arrive together, but she quickly composed herself into a professional smile. "Ms. Vance, the board meeting materials are ready," she said, handing over a folder. She then turned to me. "Mr. Evans, there seems to be an issue with the network in your office. IT is looking into it." "Thanks for the heads up," I said, nodding. I noticed a new ring on her left ring finger. It hadn't been there 2 days ago. Sarah noticed it too. "New ring. It's beautiful," she commented. Maya instinctively covered the ring with her other hand. "Ah, yes. A birthday gift. From a boyfriend?" "An old friend," Maya said, clearly uncomfortable. "I'll go prepare the conference room." After she scurried away, Sarah and I exchanged a look. The gem on that ring looked expensive, far beyond what an executive assistant could afford. That afternoon, the company held a team-building event at a nearby park. It was ostensibly to foster team spirit, but in reality, it was just a bunch of people awkwardly playing childish games. I was forced to participate in a trust fall, while Sarah was cornered by board members, discussing something serious. During a break, I found a quiet spot to catch my breath. I had just sat down on a bench when I heard Maya's hushed voice from behind a large bush. "The data is ready. No, he hasn't suspected anything. It will be done before Friday." I held my breath and slowly peeked around the bush. Maya had her back to me, talking on her phone. She was unconsciously twisting the new ring on her finger. "Mr. Chun said the price is negotiable." "Yes, the raw data and the financial models. I know the risks." A gust of wind rustled the leaves. Maya spun around, startled, and I quickly ducked back behind the bush. When I looked again, she was gone. I immediately texted Sarah. "Maya is selling company data to someone. The deal is happening before Friday. I think it's connected to David Shun." Sarah's reply was immediate. Keep watching her, but don't tip her off. We'll talk tonight. After the team-building event, Sarah called a surprise executive meeting. As the head of special projects, I was also invited. In the conference room, David Shun, a man in his late 50s with thinning hair, was handing out financial reports. Third quarter performance exceeded expectations, he said with a smile, though his eyes kept darting towards Sarah, particularly the growth in the Asia-Pacific region. Sarah flipped through the report, her face a mask of indifference. Why did R&D spending increase by 37% compared to the same quarter last year? New project investments, Marcus Thorne chimed in, especially in the quantum encryption space. The equipment is very costly. Is that so? Sarah turned to me. Leo, in your technical evaluation report, you mentioned that the quantum encryption equipment we use is leased, not purchased. The cost should have decreased by 15%. All eyes in the room swiveled to me. I cleared my throat. That's correct. According to the contract terms, we pay a monthly licensing fee. There are no major capital expenditures. Beads of sweat began to form on David Chen's forehead. Well, that might just be a difference in accounting methods. Bring me the original contracts and invoices, Sarah said coldly. Now, the atmosphere in the room froze. David Chun looked pleadingly at Marcus Thorne, who was pretending to be engrossed in his laptop. That might take some time to gather, David stammered. Then have them on my desk by 9 a.m. tomorrow, Sarah said, closing her folder. Meeting adjourned. The executives filed out, whispering amongst themselves. Marcus was the last to leave, giving me a long, meaningful look at the door. Back in Sarah's office, she immediately locked the door and drew the blinds. They're destroying evidence, she said, pulling up a security feed on her phone that showed David Chin frantically rummaging through files in his office. Good thing I backed up all the original data months ago. The deal Maya mentioned. It's most likely our core algorithms and customer database, Sarah said, biting her lower lip. That's worth billions. If it leaks, the company is finished. And it's happening by Friday. The day before the auditors arrive, Sarah nodded. Perfect timing. Once the audit begins, the books will be scrutinized. The entire plan clicked into place for me. So they're going to complete the sale before the audit, then stage some kind of accident to make you take the fall? Or just maybe disappear, Sarah said calmly, as if discussing the weather. Like that out-of-control elevator. A knot of ice formed in my stomach. This wasn't a corporate spy movie anymore. This was a real threat to her life. We have to stop them, I said. We will, Sarah said, suddenly taking my hand. But first, you need to learn how to protect yourself. Training continues tonight. Her hand was warm and strong. In that moment, I was no longer the boyfriend acting a part to help an investigation. I was her partner, standing by her side. And something deeper than friendship, more complex than a simple romance, was quietly growing between us. At 7:15 a.m., I was jolted awake by the piercing shriek of a smoke alarm. I stumbled out of the guest room to find Sarah's open-concept kitchen shrouded in thick smoke. She stood there, brandishing a spatula, frowning at a blackened lump in a frying pan. Amid the alarm's wail, she wore my old T-shirt and an oversized apron, her hair thrown into a messy bun, a few sweaty strands stuck to her cheeks. Morning, she said without turning around, as if this kitchen catastrophe was a perfectly normal breakfast routine. Give me 5 more minutes. Are you cooking? I asked in disbelief, rushing to turn on the exhaust fan and open every window. Obviously, she said, poking the charred object. Scrambled eggs? In theory, it should be simple. Those are scrambled eggs? I peered closer. They look more like a carbon specimen. Sarah shot me a glare. Go wait at the table. If I wait any longer, the fire department will be here, I said, taking the spatula, turning off the heat, and scraping the eggs into the trash. What's with the sudden urge to cook? For the first time, Sarah looked genuinely flustered. She turned and pulled a small cream cake from the refrigerator. Scrawled across the top in wobbly icing were the words, "Happy birthday, Leo." I blinked. How did you know it was my birthday? Employee file. She shrugged, though the tips of her ears turned a faint pink. I wanted to surprise you. I looked at this woman who could silence a boardroom with a single glance, now pouting over her failed attempt at eggs, and felt a warmth spread through my chest. "This is already a surprise," I said softly. "I never really celebrate my birthday." Sarah looked up. "Why not?" "After my parents divorced, no one really remembered," I said with a shrug, taking the cake from her and setting it on the table. "Once I got to college and started working, I just got used to it." Sarah was quiet for a moment, then she reached out, dabbed a finger in the frosting, and dotted it on the tip of my nose. "Well, starting this year, you'd better get used to celebrating it." I froze for a second, then retaliated, smearing a streak of frosting across her cheek. Sarah's eyes widened, as if she couldn't believe anyone would dare. The next moment, we were like two kids in a full-blown frosting war, laughing until the kitchen counter and both of us were covered in cream. "Truce." Sarah finally surrendered, leaning breathlessly against the fridge. "I give up." She was ridiculously cute, frosting her hair, a smudge of sugar on her nose, the collar of the t-shirt slipping to one side to reveal her collarbone. I fought the overwhelming urge to kiss her and turned to find a cloth instead. "We need to clean this up before the cleaning lady sees it." As we cleaned, Sarah insisted on helping, which only resulted in spreading the frosting over more surfaces. Eventually, we gave up and decided to order takeout. "So," I asked, wiping down the table, "you've never cooked before?" Sarah shook her head. "There are chefs, delivery, restaurants. It was never necessary. But you decided to try today. Just eat your cake," she said, cutting a slice and pushing it toward me. But her eyes were soft. After the takeout arrived, we ate pizza in the frosting-scented kitchen. Sarah even found candles and insisted I make a wish. "3 wishes," she said, lighting them. "Say the first 2 out loud. Keep the third one for yourself." "Where did that rule come from?" "My house," she said, her expression darkening for a fraction of a second. "My mom used to say it." Watching her face flicker in the candlelight, I decided to play along. "First, I wish the company gets through this crisis." "Too corporate." "Try again." "Fine. I wish I could learn to cook one dish that won't kill anyone." Sarah chuckled. "Approved." "Second, I wish." I hesitated. I wish Sarah would smile more. "You look beautiful when you smile." In the candlelight, I saw her eyelashes flutter. She looked down, fiddling with a strawberry on the cake. "Time for the third one," she said quietly. I closed my eyes, made a wish, and blew out the candles. The room plunged into semi-darkness, lit only by the warm glow from the kitchen's under-cabinet lights. "You know," Sarah said suddenly, "I haven't celebrated a birthday since I was 10. I waited quietly for her to continue. "After my parents' accident, my uncle took over everything," she said, her voice eerily calm, though her fingers gripped her fork tightly. "My birthday became his charity day. If I was good, I might get a gift. If I wasn't..." She unconsciously touched her left wrist. I gently took her hand and saw, in the faint light, a pale, thin scar. "He burned me with a cigarette," Sarah said, pulling her hand away. "Said it was to teach me who was in charge." My blood boiled. I wanted to find that monster and beat him senseless. But Sarah's expression was unnervingly calm, as if she were telling someone else's story. "When I was 16, I hacked into his computer and found out he'd been embezzling money from the company." A small, cold smile touched her lips. "I used it to blackmail him, to get back some control of my own life and my inheritance." "So that's how you became CEO so young?" "No, that was just the beginning," Sarah said, cutting a small piece of cake. "I spent the next 7 years studying, planning, and building alliances. I finally got the board to vote him out." She shrugged. "Corporate revenge is so much more elegant than violence." I watched her profile in the candlelight and suddenly understood why she was so fiercely protective of the company. This wasn't just business. It was the defense of her entire life's work. "So now your uncle is somewhere out there, grinding his teeth, waiting for a chance to get back at me," Sarah scoffed. "Too bad for him. I won't give him that chance." We ate in silence for a while. The city lights glittered outside, and the faint sound of traffic seemed a world away. "You know," I said, breaking the silence, "when I was a kid, I wanted to open a small restaurant." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "From programmer to chef." "My dad was a cook before my parents split up." I smiled faintly. "He always said food was the world's best comfort. Then he started drinking, lost his job, and my mom left. But I always remembered how he looked when he cooked. That focus, that passion." Sarah looked thoughtful. So that's why you're a good cook. Just basic stuff? I shrugged. But food feels more real than code. Your computer doesn't thank you for writing good code, but a good meal can at least earn you a smile. Sarah suddenly stood and retrieved a bottle of red wine and 2 glasses from a cabinet. To real food and virtual code. We clinked glasses. The wine was rich, with a slightly bitter aftertaste. Sarah drank quickly, a blush rising on her cheeks. My childhood dream was to be a ballerina, she said suddenly, her gaze distant. My mom enrolled me in classes for 3 years. Then my uncle said it was a waste of time. It was hard to imagine this woman, so at home in power suits and stilettos, balancing on her toes in Swan Lake. But a wave of tenderness washed over me. Do you still dance? I've forgotten everything, she shook her head, then added, except the basic positions. Sometimes, in the bathroom, I'll just do a few turns. That small, private admission made my heart ache. Sarah seemed to realize she'd said too much and quickly finished her glass. Another? She asked, already pouring one for herself. Easy, we have work tomorrow. To hell with work, Sarah swore, a rare occurrence. It's your birthday. We're celebrating. She downed another glass, then a third. By the time I managed to take the bottle from her, her eyes were glassy, her words slightly slurred. You know, she said, poking my chest, you're the first person I've ever brought home. Really? She nodded, a few strands of hair falling loose. Everyone else was just for show, business. But you, she tilted her head, studying me. You're different. How am I different? You're not afraid of me, she whispered. Everyone else, Marcus, David, they look at me with either fear or calculation in their eyes. But you, her fingers traced a line down my cheek. You look at me like I'm just a normal person. The alcohol and the candlelight made everything feel surreal. I took her hand, feeling the warmth of her fingertips. Because you're a normal person, I said softly. One who burns eggs, starts frosting fights, and secretly practices ballet in the bathroom. Sarah's eyes glistened. She leaned in closer, her breath smelling of wine. Your third wish. What was it? If I say it, it won't come true. Tell me, she whispered. I'll help make it happen. I took a deep breath. I wished. A shrill ring from her phone shattered the moment. Sarah frowned, reaching for it, and nearly slid off her chair. I steadied her, glancing at the caller ID. Head of security. What is it? Sarah answered, her voice instantly sober despite the flush on her face. When? Are you sure it was him? Keep watching. Don't make a move. After hanging up, she rubbed her temples. Marcus just went to David Shen's house. This late? Yes. And she tried to stand but stumbled. I quickly helped her up, and they carried out 2 silver briefcases. Evidence? Or cash? Not sure, Sarah said, trying to walk toward her home office but swaying on her feet. I need to check the surveillance. Ugh. She suddenly covered her mouth, and I rushed her to the bathroom. 3 glasses of wine, plus cake and pizza, were clearly too much for her system. After she was done, I gave her some water and a towel, then half-carried her to the bedroom. She lay on the bed, pale but looking more clear-eyed. Sorry for ruining your birthday, she murmured. On the contrary, I said, pulling the covers over her. This was the best birthday I've ever had. Sarah smiled faintly and closed her eyes. As I turned to leave, her hand shot out and grabbed my wrist. Don't go, she said, her voice barely a whisper. Just sit here for a minute. I sat on the edge of the bed, gently brushing the hair from her forehead. On the verge of sleep, she looked young and vulnerable, nothing like the formidable CEO who commanded boardrooms. My third wish, I whispered, sure she was already asleep, was that one day you would trust me as much as I trust you. Moonlight filtered through a crack in the curtains, tracing her quiet silhouette. I leaned down and placed a soft kiss on her forehead, then slipped out of the room. The next morning, the smell of coffee woke me. Sarah was already dressed and in the kitchen, this time simply brewing coffee and making toast. Morning, she said, handing me a mug. Last night. Thank you. Anytime, I replied, taking the coffee. Any news on Marcus? Surveillance shows them exchanging the briefcases, but the contents are unclear, Sarah said, back to her usual calm demeanor. However, Maya Lin called in sick this morning. Coincidence? There are no coincidences, she said, taking a sip of coffee. Not 3 days before an audit. I was about to ask more when Sarah's phone rang. She glanced at the screen, and her face went pale. The audit's been moved up. It starts this afternoon. What? But it was scheduled for Friday. They know we're on to them, Sarah said, standing up abruptly. We have to move now. You handle the tech side. Look for any suspicious data modification logs. I'll deal with the auditors. How much time do we have? 4 hours, tops, she said, grabbing her coat and bag. We need concrete proof by noon, or else. She didn't finish, but we both knew the consequences. If the audit started without solid evidence, Sarah would likely be suspended, giving Marcus and her uncle all the time they needed to erase their tracks. I quickly showered and dressed. As we were leaving, Sarah suddenly pulled me to a stop and gave me a quick, urgent kiss. Be careful, she whispered. If you find anything, call me immediately. Don't act alone. This kiss was nothing like last night's tender moments. It was filled with urgency and fear. I nodded, squeezing her hand. In the elevator, we stood apart, back in our roles as CEO and department head. But as we walked out of the lobby, a familiar gray sedan slowly drove past. Sarah's fingers dug into my arm. That's the car that followed us last night. I pretended to adjust my tie, watching the car in my peripheral vision. The windows were tinted, but the license plate was the same. They're watching your apartment and the office, I said in a low voice. And now they're here. This is no coincidence, Sarah said, releasing my arm, her voice returning to a normal volume. Leo, you go on ahead to the office. I have a personal matter to attend to. She gave me a meaningful look, then walked toward her car. I understood her intent: split up, reduce the risk. On my way to the subway, I kept glancing over my shoulder. After a few turns, I spotted him, a man in a baseball cap, keeping a consistent distance. I ducked into a coffee shop, slipped out the back entrance, and managed to lose him. The company lobby was unusually quiet. Even the receptionist was a new face. In the elevator, I ran into Kevin from IT. Leo, he whispered, the system's been acting weird this morning. Marcus had us run a full diagnostic on all the backup servers. What kind of weird? I don't know, but he glanced around. It looks like a bunch of files in the finance department were modified. The timestamps are all from last week, but the modification logs were generated at 3 a.m. today. My heart hammered against my ribs. Are there backups? The standard backups were all overwritten, Kevin hesitated. But I made a private mirror image on my external hard drive. Why? Just a gut feeling, he shrugged. Marcus has been requesting too many weird, off-protocol operations lately. I wanted some insurance. I was about to say more when the elevator stopped at the engineering floor. The doors opened to reveal Marcus Thorne, standing there with a thunderous expression on his face. Leo, he said coldly. My office. Now. The door to Marcus Thorne's office clicked shut behind me with an ominous finality. Sit, he commanded, pointing to the chair opposite his desk. He leaned against the edge of the desk himself, looking down at me. I forced myself to stay calm, my eyes scanning the room as I sat. Marcus's office was twice the size of mine, one wall covered in monitors displaying a dizzying array of server statuses and data streams. The other wall was a shrine to his own achievements, certificates, and awards, a classic look how great I am display. I hear you've been looking into data anomalies in the finance department, Marcus said, getting straight to the point. My heart skipped a beat. Did Kevin rat me out, or were they monitoring me all along? Just a routine check, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. New systems always have compatibility bugs. Marcus gave a humorless smile. Is that so? Then why were you specifically checking timestamp from last week? A user reported some incorrect file modification dates. I lied without flinching. Probably a time zone setting issue. Leo. Marcus shook his head like a disappointed teacher. We're all busy people. Let's not dance around the issue. I know Sarah sent you to investigate. My hands gripped the armrests, my palms starting to sweat. I don't know what you're talking about. Stop playing dumb. He suddenly leaned in, his hands braced on the arms of my chair, his face just inches from mine. I know about your relationship, and I know she's digging into the books. The question is, he lowered his voice to a conspiratorial whisper, do you have any idea what kind of fire you're playing with? His breath smelled of mint gum and coffee, and his eyes were bloodshot. I noticed a fresh, thin scratch on his left ring finger, like a hurried paper cut. Marcus, if this is some kind of test. It's not a test. He straightened up, walking over to the window. It's a warning. Sarah isn't who you think she is. She'll use you up and throw you away like trash. I secretly breathed a sigh of relief. He thought I was just a pawn, unaware that Sarah and I were working together. I'm just doing my job, I said calmly. Marcus spun around, his face contorting with rage. Your job is to help that bitch destroy this company, to ruin everything we've all worked for. I tensed, instinctively preparing for a physical attack, but just as quickly, he composed himself, even smoothing his tie. Sorry, he said with a fake smile. Lost my cool. The pressure has been immense lately. The audit being moved up has everyone on edge. I understand, I said, slowly getting to my feet. If there's nothing else. Wait, he said, walking back to his desk and pulling a USB drive from a drawer. I have a technical document here I need you to evaluate. Give me your feedback by tomorrow. I took the drive. It felt heavy, not like a standard storage device. What is it? A new proposal for quantum encryption, he smiled. You're the expert on that, right? My shirt was soaked through by the time I walked out of his office. The USB drive in my pocket felt like a hot coal. Marcus was clearly testing me, maybe even setting a trap. Back in my own office, I locked the door, pulled down the blinds, and retrieved an old air-gapped laptop from a drawer, one I kept offline specifically for examining suspicious files. I plugged in the drive and booted up a sandboxed virtual machine. The drive contained a single encrypted folder. I tried a few common passwords with no luck. Just as I was about to give up, a thought occurred to me. I typed in Sarah's birthday. The folder opened. Inside was a video file and several documents. The video was of Sarah and me during our frosting fight in her kitchen, clearly filmed from outside the window. The documents were a detailed dossier on me, my family history, education, even my college dating record. The most disturbing file was the last one, titled Contingency Plan. It detailed several scenarios for an accidental death, including a car crash, a fall from a height, and food poisoning. My photo was attached to the last page, a red question mark drawn over it. My phone vibrated. A text from Sarah. Emergency. David Chun is missing. Audit postponed until tomorrow. What's your status? I quickly replied. Marcus gave me a USB. It has surveillance video of us and a full background check on me. Also an accident plan. Sarah called immediately. Leave the building now. Her voice was taut with urgency. Take the fire escape, not the elevator. There's a car waiting for you at the back entrance. Is it that serious? They're making their move, she said, her voice low. I suspect David didn't just disappear. He took the evidence and ran. I quickly packed my things, placing the USB drive in an anti-static bag in my pocket. As I opened my office door, I saw Maya Lynn standing in the hallway, pretending to arrange some files. Mr. Evans, she smiled. Mr. Thorne sent me to pick up that evaluation report. It's not finished yet, I said, sidestepping her. Tell him I'll have it for him tomorrow. But he said it was urgent. Maya followed, her heels clicking rapidly on the marble floor. I quickened my pace. Then tell him to be patient. I ducked around a corner and slipped into the men's restroom, climbing out the window into the fire escape. After running down 20 flights of stairs, my legs were shaking by the time I reached the underground parking garage. A black SUV was parked by the back entrance as promised, but it wasn't Sarah's usual car. The window rolled down to reveal a stranger's face. Mr. Evans, Ms. Vance sent me to pick you up. I hesitated. What's the countersign? The man frowned. What countersign? I took 2 steps back and broke into a run. I heard a car door open and footsteps behind me. I darted between 2 rows of cars, hearing at least 2 people in pursuit. A man in a security guard's uniform suddenly appeared up ahead. I was about to turn when he held up a hand. This way, Mr. Evans. It was the head of security from Sarah's building. I recognized him and relaxed slightly. He led me through an employee-only door and down a series of winding corridors to a loading dock. Go out this door and turn right. There's a silver Mercedes, he said, handing me a key card. Use this to get into the B-Tower lobby. The elevator will take you directly to the penthouse. Thanks. Where's Sarah? I don't know. Her only instruction was to ensure you got out safely. The driver of the silver Mercedes was Sarah's personal bodyguard, whom I'd seen a few times. This time I knew it was safe, and I got in the car. "Ms. Vance is waiting for you at the safe house," the driver said, handing me a blindfold. "You know the rules." I sighed and put on the blindfold. Sarah's safe house was her most secret location, a place I had never seen, and every trip there required being blindfolded. The drive took about 40 minutes, with countless turns. When the blindfold was finally removed, I found myself in a loft-style apartment. Sarah was standing by the floor-to-ceiling window, her back to me, phone pressed to her ear. "Keep searching." "No, don't involve the police yet." "Yes, monitor all his accounts." She hung up and turned to face me. I was surprised to see her in a different outfit, black tactical pants, a tight-fitting black shirt, and combat boots, her hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail. More striking was the distinct outline of a handgun holstered at her hip. "Whoa," I raised an eyebrow. "Going for the secret agent look today." "Not now, Leo," she said, walking over to give me a quick, professional once-over for injuries. "Where's the drive?" I handed it to her, noticing two other people in the room, both working on laptops. "My team," Sarah said by way of introduction. "A tech specialist and a former special forces operator." The tech specialist was a skinny kid with glasses who looked no older than 25. The operator was a bald, muscular man covered in tattoos. They both gave a curt nod and went back to their work. Sarah plugged the USB drive into a specialized piece of hardware and began analyzing its contents. When she saw the video and the contingency plan file, her jaw tightened. "They bugged my apartment," she said, her voice like ice. "This has gone way beyond corporate espionage." "Did Davidson really run?" "More like he's hiding with the money and evidence," Sarah said, pulling up a map on her phone that showed several red dots. "His last credit card transaction was at the airport, but there's no record of him on any flight. I suspect he used a fake passport to leave the country." "So the audit is postponed until tomorrow, but that's just for show," Sarah shook her head. "The board is already holding an emergency meeting to discuss suspending my duties." I took her hand. "What can we do?" Sarah glanced at her watch. "First, you need to eat. Then we review the evidence we have." She led me to the open kitchen, where, to my surprise, several dishes were already laid out on the counter. Scrambled eggs with tomatoes, stir-fried pork with peppers, and a bowl of seaweed soup. They were shockingly familiar. "You cook?" I asked in disbelief. Sarah's ears turned slightly pink. "It's takeout." I took a bite of the eggs, and my eyes widened in recognition. "This is from that little diner downstairs from my old place." "How did you mentioned that place had a taste of home 3 times, Sarah said, pretending to be absorbed in her phone. "I sent someone to get it." This powerful, almost tyrannical woman had remembered a casual comment I'd made about a neighborhood diner and had someone drive across the city to pick it up. A corner of my heart I didn't know existed suddenly melted. "Thank you," I said softly. "But next time, I'll take you there myself. It's even better fresh." A small smile played on Sarah's lips. "Just eat your food." After the meal, we gathered with her 2 associates to review the clues. The tech specialist, he told me to call him Mouse, had managed to recover some of the deleted financial data. "Look here," he said, pointing to a string of numbers on the screen. "For the past 6 months, there have been large fund transfers every month to an entity called Nexus Innovations, Cayman." "We don't have a branch in the Cayman Islands," Sarah frowned. "Even better," Mouse said, typing a few commands. "The registration email for this shell company is Marcus Thorne at Nexus Innovations. Com." Marcus used his own company email to register a shell corp? I was incredulous. "That's ridiculously bold." "No, it's a setup," Sarah said suddenly. "Marcus isn't that stupid. Someone deliberately planted this evidence to frame him." "Your uncle?" Sarah nodded. "It's a signature move. Create infighting while he stays hidden in the shadows." The bald operator, he insisted on being called Deacon, handed us a surveillance report. "David Shun went to a bank safe deposit box late last night. 2 hours later, he showed up at this address." The address was a villa in the suburbs, registered to an offshore company. "We need to get inside," Sarah decided. "That's too dangerous," I objected. "If that's your uncle's stronghold." "Which is exactly why we need to go," Sarah's eyes glinted dangerously. "He must have left something behind." After some debate, we reached a compromise. Sarah and Deacon would scout the villa, while Mouse and I stayed at the safe house to continue analyzing the data. After they left, Mouse suddenly asked me, "Are you two actually dating?" I nearly choked on my water. "What?" "The boss," Mouse said, pushing his glasses up his nose. "I've never seen her be so human with anyone before." I didn't know how to answer. In theory, we were dating, but it had started as an act. And now, the frosting fight, the birthday cake, the takeout from my old neighborhood, that was all far beyond the scope of acting. "It's complicated," I finally said. Mouse gave me a knowing look and didn't press the issue. At 2 a.m., Sarah and Deacon returned, carrying a silver briefcase. Sarah's face was pale, and there was a dark stain of blood on the sleeve of her right arm. "You're hurt." I jumped to my feet. "It's just a scratch," she said, avoiding my attempt to examine it. "Look what we found." The briefcase was filled with documents and several hard drives. On top was a share transfer agreement. Arthur Vance was planning to sell all of his company's stock to an investment firm called Aegis Capital. "This doesn't make sense," Sarah frowned. "My uncle has always guarded his shares like they were his life. Why would he suddenly sell? Unless—" I flipped to the last page and saw the signature line was blank. "Unless it wasn't voluntary. Look at this clause. If the signatory dies within 1 week of signing, the shares automatically transfer to the buyer." He's setting up his escape, Sarah realized. If the plan fails, he pretends he was forced to sign, then fakes his own death and flees the country. "Boss, look at this," Mouse suddenly exclaimed. He pulled up a surveillance video showing David Chun and Marcus Thorne exchanging documents at a restaurant. When magnified, the document title was Visible, Nexus Innovations Core Algorithm and Customer Data Sale Agreement. They weren't just embezzling money. They were planning to sell off our core technology. Sarah's voice was as cold as ice. "That's enough to put them in prison for life. But we need more," I reminded her. "Especially evidence directly linking your uncle." Sarah checked her watch. "The audit starts at 9. We have 6 hours." The next few hours were a frantic race against time. We split up the documents, searching for any clue. At 4 a.m., I found it in an encrypted file. Email correspondence between Arthur Vance, Marcus, and David, detailing the entire plan for embezzlement and stock manipulation. I got it. I was about to save the file when the screen suddenly went blue. "Damn it." Mouse slammed his keyboard. "Someone is wiping the data remotely." We scrambled to recover the files, but it was too late. All the new evidence was gone, leaving us with only what we had before. "They know we found them," Sarah said, her voice terrifyingly calm. "We need to move. Now." We quickly began packing up the equipment. Just then, Deacon's phone rang. He answered, and his face went white. "Safe house is compromised. They'll be here in 3 minutes." Sarah immediately pulled 2 handguns from a drawer, tossing one to Deacon. "Back exit. Now." We had just burst through the back stairwell door when we heard the ding of the elevator arriving. Deacon stayed behind to cover our escape, while Sarah pulled me and Mouse down the fire escape. "How did they find us?" I panted. "There has to be a mole," Sarah gritted her teeth. "Or we were tracked." In the underground garage, we split into 2 cars. Sarah and I in one, Mouse and Deacon in the other. "We're going to the office," Sarah said, starting the car. "The most dangerous place is now the safest." The car sped into the pre-dawn darkness. Sarah drove with intense focus, constantly checking the rearview mirror. I checked my own pocket for the one piece of evidence we had left, the USB drive from Marcus. "Leo," Sarah said suddenly, her eyes still on the road. "If things go south, I want you to get out of the city immediately." "What?" "No, I'm not leaving you. Hear me out," she interrupted. "My uncle is not just a businessman. He knows dangerous people. If he's cornered, he'll do anything." For the first time, I heard genuine fear in her voice. "We'll be okay," I said, covering her hand on the gear shift. "We have evidence. We have—" Blinding headlights flooded the car from behind. A black SUV was closing in on us at an incredible speed. "Hold on," Sarah yelled, wrenching the wheel. But it was too late. The SUV slammed into our rear bumper. The world spun, and the airbag exploded in my face. The last thing I saw was Sarah, trying to draw her gun, being thrown against the window by the force of the second impact. Then, everything went black. Blinding white light. I blinked several times before my vision finally focused. I was staring at an unfamiliar ceiling, an LED panel mercilessly beaming down on my face. I tried to raise a hand to shield my eyes, but found my wrists bound to the arms of a chair. Memories returned in fractured shards. The car crash, Sarah unconscious, and then, "What? You're awake?" A man's voice came from the side. I turned my head with a groan and saw a man in a black suit sitting nearby, calmly peeling an apple. The paring knife danced in his hands, its blade catching the cold light. "Where am I?" My voice was a raw, sandpaper rasp. "That's not important," the man said, taking a bite of the apple. "What's important is what you know." "Know about what?" "Don't play dumb," he said, suddenly stabbing the knife into the wooden table between us. The handle quivered. "Sarah's plan, the evidence she has, and..." He leaned in close. "Where did she hide the backups?" The scent of apple mixed with cloying cologne was making me nauseous. I noticed the ring on his left ring finger. It was identical to Myolin's. "I don't know what you're talking about," I said, testing the ropes on my wrists. They were tight. "I'm just a programmer." The man laughed, a grating sound like a rusty hinge. "A programmer? Sarah Vance's boyfriend? Or her little helper investigating a corporate conspiracy?" He pulled out his phone and showed me a photo. It was of me and Sarah in the safe house, paper spread out before us. Which identity is speaking right now? My stomach dropped. The safe house had been bugged. Was there a mole, mouse, or deacon? "What do you want?" I decided to be direct. "Information," the man said, holding up a tablet computer. "Specifically this." The screen displayed the login portal for the Nexus Innovations core database. "You wanted to hack into my own company?" "Clever boy," he smiled. "Use your credentials, log in, delete a few specific files, and maybe you'll live to see another day." I stared at him for a few seconds, then let out a small laugh. "You have no idea what Sarah will do to you, do you?" The man raised an eyebrow. "Sarah is in no position to do anything. The board has suspended her, and the police are investigating her for corporate espionage." He was bluffing. If Sarah was truly neutralized, they wouldn't need to kidnap me. "Fiend," he sighed. "But I need my hands." The man considered this for a moment, then walked over and untied my right hand. "No funny business." I flexed my numb fingers and took the tablet. The login page looked familiar, but the details were subtly wrong. It was a phishing site. They wanted to steal my credentials. "The connection is slow," I complained. "What's the Wi-Fi password in here?" "Just get it done," the man said coldly. I pretended to type for a minute, then frowned. "It requires two-factor authentication." "Did Ms. Vance, did Sarah get the code on her phone?" The man's expression soured. "Are you messing with me?" "No, it's real," I said with an innocent blink. "It's a new company policy. All sensitive operations require a second verification. You can ask Maya. She should know." The man's eyes flickered at the mention of Maya's name. Bingo. They were working together. "Keep trying," he commanded. "There has to be a way around it." "Okay, but I really need to use the bathroom," I said, clamping my legs together. "I can't hold it." "Hold it. If I have an accident on this expensive-looking chair." I squirmed for effect. The man swore under his breath and hauled me to my feet. 5 minutes. He marched me down a hallway. I feigned a stumble, pretending to be weak, while actually scanning my surroundings. It was an old, converted office building, windows boarded up, at least 3 guards visible. As we passed a fire extinguisher cabinet, I tripped again, using the opportunity to wedge a coin from my pocket into the handle seam. "Useless," the man grumbled, yanking me up. "What does Sarah even see in a weakling like you?" "My charming personality?" I grinned. The bathroom had a small window, but it was welded shut. I took care of business, and as I washed my hands, I used the liquid soap to draw a small arrow on the mirror, a trick Sarah had taught me. It would dry almost invisibly, but could be seen with special glasses. Back in the interrogation room, I continued to pretend I was trying to hack the system, making small talk with my captor. "So, are you Maya's boyfriend? Or a boss?" "Shut up and work." "That's a unique ring. Is it a matching set?" The man suddenly grabbed me by the throat. "One more word and I'll cut out your tongue." I coughed and nodded, and he released his grip. Okay, that topic was a landmine. 2 hours later, I finally got into the system. In reality, I had secretly coded a program to make the tablet display a fake login success screen. "Which files need to be deleted?" I asked. The man immediately perked up, leaning over to point. As he was distracted, I stealthily used my knee to press a piece of gum to the underside of the table. Wrapped inside the gum was a button-sized tracker I'd pulled from the seam of my shirt. Sarah had given me a small kit of these gadgets. I never thought I'd actually use one. These, and these, the man said, pointing at the screen, especially the audit logs from the finance module. Delete all of them. All of them. I feigned compliance, but I was actually running a hidden data scraping program. A few minutes later, the tablet screen went blue. What happened? The man roared. The system must have crashed, I said, shrugging innocently. The remote connection is probably unstable. He swore and snatched the tablet, stabbing at the screen with his finger. Just then, we heard a muffled thud from down the hall, like something heavy falling. The man looked up, his hand going to the gun at his hip. Stay here. Don't move, he warned, then left the room. Of course, I didn't listen. Once he was gone, I used a razor blade hidden in the sole of my shoe to saw through the remaining rope. Sarah's safe house training was paying off. I crept to the door and listened to the sounds of chaotic footsteps and crackling walkie-talkies. Suddenly, a gunshot echoed down the hall, making my ears ring. It was followed by more shots, shouting and running. I hid behind the door, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm. The door was kicked open, and a man in full tactical gear burst in. I threw my hands up. Civilian, I'm a civilian. Behind the tactical officer, Sarah strode into the room. She was wearing a ballistic vest, her hair was a mess, and her eyes were red-rimmed. The moment she saw me, she froze, as if struck by lightning. You're okay. Her voice trembled slightly. Aside from a near-fatal bladder explosion, I'm fine. I tried to joke, but my own voice was shaking. Sarah rushed forward and threw her arms around me, hugging me so tightly I thought my ribs would crack. She smelled of gunpowder, sweat, and a faint metallic scent of blood, but right now it was the best smell in the world. Did they hurt you? She pulled back, her hands checking my face and arms. No, just some friendly conversation and a fruit knife demonstration, I said, taking her hands in mine. How did you find me? Your tracker and your little tricks. A flicker of approval crossed her face. The coin by the extinguisher, the arrow on the mirror. You did good. More sirens wailed outside. Sarah pulled me toward the door. We need to leave now. The police will handle this, but the mastermind is still out there. The hallway was littered with the bodies of my kidnappers, some groaning, some motionless. I saw the man who interrogated me handcuffed to a radiator, his forehead bleeding but conscious. He flinched when he saw Sarah. Ms. Vance? He rasped. I was just following orders. Sarah stopped and walked slowly toward him, her movements graceful and predatory, like a panther closing in on its prey. Whose orders? She asked softly. The man shook his head. I don't know. Really? It was all over the phone. Sarah suddenly grabbed his chin, her grip so strong he cried out. This ring. Who gave it to you? It's the organization's mark. What organization? The man suddenly clenched his jaw, refusing to speak. Sarah let out a cold laugh and pulled a small syringe from her pocket. Know what this is? She dangled it in front of his eyes. Truth serum. Military grade. After this, you'll confess to everything, right down to peeking at girls in the kindergarten bathroom. The man's eyes widened in terror. I stared at Sarah in shock. She'd never mentioned having anything like this. Last chance, Sarah's voice was like ice. Who sent you? Arthur. Arthur Vance. The man finally broke. He said if we grabbed the kid, we could force your hand. Sarah's expression was terrifying. She released the man and turned to me. Let's go. The parking lot outside was a scene of controlled chaos, with police cars, an ambulance, and black SUVs everywhere. Deacon was standing by a car, his arm wrapped in a bandage. He nodded as we approached. Is it handled? Sarah asked. 6 in custody, 2 seriously wounded. Deacon reported succinctly. The police are being very cooperative. I realized then that the tactical officers were all Sarah's own security team, dressed in similar gear. The actual police were just arriving and setting up a perimeter. We got into an unremarkable gray sedan. Sarah took the wheel and drove away from the scene. Where to now? I asked. Somewhere safe, Sarah said, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. My uncle knows we have the evidence. He's a cornered animal now. The organization that man mentioned, Aegis, Sarah's voice was tight. My uncle's private security force. A legitimate company on paper, but they handle all his dirty work. I remembered the design on the ring, an abstract, shaped like a shield. Is Maya one of them? Yes. She was his mole on my team, Sarah sneered. The ring is their membership sigil. I should have seen it sooner. The car pulled into the underground garage of a nondescript apartment building. We took an elevator to the top floor, and Sarah used an iris scanner to open an unmarked door. Behind the door was a spacious, modern apartment with a panoramic view of the city. Several technicians were busy at a bank of computers. They stood as we entered. Ms. Vance, Mr. Evans, a young woman with glasses, said, walking over. We've tracked Arthur Vance's location. He's at the Azure Marina Yacht Club. Prep the helicopter, Sarah commanded. We leave in 15 minutes. Helicopter? I stared at her. Exactly how many modes of transportation do you have? Sarah didn't answer, pulling me into a bedroom. After closing the door, she suddenly hugged me, her body trembling slightly. I thought. Her voice was muffled against my shoulder. I thought I wasn't going to make it in time. I stroked her back, feeling her racing heartbeat. This woman, so cold and ruthless in front of her enemies, was as fragile as a child in my arms. I'm okay, I whispered. Thanks to your training and your little gadgets. Sarah pulled back, her eyes moist but tearless. What did they ask you? For access to the company's systems, and about the evidence you had. I recalled. They were desperate to delete the financial audit logs. Of course, Sarah scoffed. The audit starts today. They wanted to destroy the last traces of evidence. What now? Now my uncle is exposed. Sarah's expression hardened. It's time to end this. She took a small black case from the nightstand. Inside were 2 handguns. I'm not really good with those. I hesitated. Just in case, Sarah handed one to me. Basics, safety off, point, pull the trigger. Don't aim it at me or yourself. I took the gun carefully. It was much heavier than I expected. Sarah, I took a deep breath. Are you sure about this? He's your uncle. He sent men to kidnap you. Her voice was as hard as steel. He killed my parents, embezzled the company's fortune, and now he wants us dead. Blood means nothing. I had never seen her so resolute. But I knew she was right. Arthur Vance wouldn't stop until he was stopped for good. Okay, I nodded. What's the plan? Sarah was about to answer when her phone rang. She glanced at the screen, her face changing. The auditors found an anomalous fund transfer, traced to an overseas account belonging to Marcus Thorne. So Marcus really was the mole? No, it's too obvious. Sarah shook her head. My uncle is framing him. If Marcus gets arrested, he'll turn on my uncle in a heartbeat, so your uncle is going to get rid of Marcus first. I realized with a dawning horror, just like he got rid of your parents. Sarah's eyes confirmed my suspicion. She quickly dialed a number. Deacon, get a team to protect Marcus Thorne. Yes, at all costs. He knows too much. Hanging up, she turned to me. Change of plans. We're going to save Marcus. Save the man who tried to have us killed. He's our key witness, she said, already heading for the door. And she paused, as if choosing her words carefully. And what? And I don't want to become like my uncle, she said softly. An eye for an eye just leads to an endless cycle of revenge. I'm going to end this legally, even if it's harder and more dangerous. In that moment, I saw the light in Sarah's soul. Beneath the cold exterior of a corporate titan, she held onto a fundamental decency. I instinctively walked over and kissed her. It was a short, intense kiss. When we broke apart, Sarah was blushing, a rare sight. When this is all over, she whispered. When this is all over, I nodded. 10 minutes later, we were in a black helicopter. Sarah put on a headset, her expression once again steely and determined. Deacon handed us ballistic vests and more gear. Marcus was last seen at a coffee shop near the office, Deacon reported, his voice loud over the rotor wash. Our team has the area contained. What about Maya? Sarah asked. Vanished. Apartment cleared out, phone destroyed. Sarah frowned. Find her. She wouldn't disappear like that unless she was carrying something important. The helicopter lifted off, the city shrinking below us. I gripped the armrest, my heart pounding. A day ago, I was a programmer. Now, I was wearing a ballistic vest on my way to a hostage rescue. Life was more unpredictable than code. Leo, Sarah said, suddenly taking my hand. You don't have to do this. I can have them drop you at a secure location. I looked into her worried eyes and shook my head. Rule number one of coding. Once you start a run, you see it through to the end. Sarah smiled faintly, squeezing my hand. Then let's see it through together. The helicopter banked toward the other side of the city as the setting sun painted the sky a bloody red. Whatever was waiting for us, at least for now, we were facing it together. Hashtag Chapter 8. The final confrontation. The helicopter touched down on the roof of the Nexus Innovations building just as the last sliver of sun sank below the horizon. The wail of sirens echoed from several streets away, where red and blue lights pulsed in the twilight. Police have the coffee shop surrounded. Deacon reported through our headsets. Marcus is inside, along with at least 2 armed hostiles. Sarah checked the magazine of her handgun with the practiced ease of someone shuffling TPS reports. Who's the police commander on scene? Captain Miller. Get him on the line. Tell him I'm handling this personally, Sarah said, then turned to me. You wait in the helicopter. No, I said, grabbing her arm. Marcus knows me. He might be more willing to cooperate. Sarah started to object, but saw the determination in my eyes. She bit her lower lip. Stay close to me, and don't try to be a hero. We took the elevator down and slipped out a back entrance, making our way through the alleyways toward the cafe. A police perimeter was already established, with officers taking cover behind their cruisers. A middle-aged man in a ballistic vest saw Sarah and hurried over. Ms. Vance, this is a complicated situation, he said in a low voice. Thorne has taken a waitress hostage. What are his demands? A car and a plane. Says he wants to leave the country. Sarah scoffed. He's running scared. She scanned the cafe's layout. What about the back door? Barricaded from the inside and wired with an alarm. The roof. Captain Miller shook his head. The skylight is too small for an adult. I studied the cafe's large glass windows, noticing a small gap where the curtains weren't fully drawn. I can see inside from here, I said, pointing to the gap. I can at least confirm the hostage's status. Sarah was about to argue when a gunshot cracked from inside the cafe, followed by a woman's scream. Captain Miller immediately grabbed his radio, but there was no response from the negotiator. We're out of time. Sarah made a decision. Deacon, get the flashbangs ready. Captain Miller, have your men create a diversion at the front. Leo, stay on my 6. The plan was so simple, it was reckless. Create a distraction while Sarah led a breach team from his side. My heart hammered against my ribs as I followed her through the alley. She stopped at the side of the cafe, and Deacon handed her a small breaching charge. 3-second fuse, she whispered in my ear, her breath hot. Close your eyes, cover your ears. The explosion was more of a dull thump than a bang, but the white light that followed was blinding even through my closed eyelids. I heard Sarah and Deacon rush in, followed by a series of gunshots. By the time I stumbled in after them, the situation was under control. Marcus Thorne was slumped in a corner, a gunshot wound in his shoulder, blood seeping through his fingers. The waitress was huddled behind the counter, shaking but apparently unharmed. 2 other men in black suits were down on the floor, one groaning, the other still. Medics! Sarah yelled at Captain Miller, then strode over to Marcus. Who sent you? Marcus's face was chalk white, but his eyes were filled with a feral defiance. You think you've won. He's more powerful than you can possibly imagine. Where is Arthur Vance? Sera demanded. Marcus let out a twisted, gurgling laugh. He's already arranged his escape. And you'll end up just like your parents. Sarah grabbed him by the collar. My parents' death wasn't an accident, was it? An accident? Marcus coughed, a fleck of bloody foam appearing at the corner of his mouth. Your father was too clever. He found the discrepancies in the books. Your uncle had no choice. Deacon suddenly stepped forward. Ma'am, he's crashing. It was true. Marcus's complexion had shifted from pale to a ghastly blue, his breathing ragged. Sarah released him, and paramedics swarmed in. Cyanide, one of the medics said after a quick examination, shaking his head. In a molar capsule. There's nothing we can do. Marcus looked at Sarah one last time, his lips moving silently. Then his head lolled to the side. What did he say? I asked. Sarah's expression was carved from ice. The yacht. 10 minutes later, we were in a mobile command unit. A lead on Maya Lynn's whereabouts had finally come through. She had been spotted at the marina an hour ago. The Azure Marina, Deacon said, pointing at a map. Arthur Vance's yacht, the Neptune's Folly, is docked there. He's making his escape, Sarah sneered. Notify the Coast Guard to lock down the harbor, but don't move in on him yet. How do we get on board? I asked. Sarah pulled up a schematic of the yacht. The Neptune is custom-built with 3 main entry points. Deacon, you take Alpha Team in from the stern. Bravo Team from the lower deck. We, she pointed to the bow, are going in the front door. The front door? I stared at her. My uncle is an arrogant man, Sarah said, a cold fire in her eyes. He'll want to witness my failure personally. With the plan set, we boarded the helicopter once more. Night had fully descended, the city lights glittering below. During the flight, Sarah held my hand in a grip so tight it was almost painful. He will pay for what he did, she whispered, more to herself than to me. This time, he won't get away. The marina was ablaze with lights, dozens of luxury yachts bobbing gently in their slips. The Neptune's Folly was the largest of them all, its 3 decks lit up as if for a party. A disguise, Sarah scoffed. Alpha, Bravo, get in position. We're going in. We approached from an adjacent dock, pretending to be guests. Sarah had changed into a stunning black evening gown, while I felt awkward and stiff in a borrowed suit that felt like someone else's skin. Act natural, Sarah said, taking my arm. Smile. We're here to party. I'm not good at this, I muttered. Think of it as debugging, she whispered, squeezing my hand. Find the vulnerability and exploit it. 2 guards stood at the bottom of the gangway. Sarah walked toward them with her head held high. One of the guards moved to stop her, then did a double take. Ms. Vance, he stammered. My uncle invited me to his party, Sarah smiled sweetly. Did he forget to inform you? The guard hesitated, reaching for his walkie-talkie. In a single, fluid motion, Sarah chopped him on the side of the neck, and he crumpled. Before the second guard could react, I mimicked her move, striking him in the stomach. It wasn't a powerful blow, but it was enough to distract him for the split second Sarah needed to disable him with an elbow strike. Not bad, she said approvingly, retrieving a key card from the first guard's belt. We quickly ascended the gangway. The main deck was indeed set up for a party, with dozens of well-dressed guests mingling and a live band playing soft jazz. No one seemed to have noticed the 2 unconscious guards. Split up and search, Sarah murmured. My uncle will be on the top deck. We separated. I pretended to be a lost guest, weaving through the crowd. Suddenly, a hand landed on my shoulder. Mr. Evans, a familiar female voice said. I turned to find Maya Lynn standing there. She was as elegant as ever, though there were dark circles under her eyes. On her left hand, the Aegis ring glinted. Ms. Lynn, I forced a smile. Great party. Is Ms. Vance here as well? She asked, scanning the crowd. A shame. Mr. Vance just left. Left? On a speedboat, heading for open water, she smiled. There's a Panamanian freighter waiting for him out there. I tried to text Sarah, but she didn't reply. Maya noticed my action, and her smile widened. Signal jammer. Basic security. Why did you stay behind? Someone has to clean up, she said, pulling a small device with a blinking red light from her clutch. For instance, ensuring no inconvenient evidence is left behind. I recognized it as a remote detonator, and my blood ran cold. Maya seemed to enjoy my expression. Don't worry, it's not a bomb. Just a data purge. Plenty of time for everyone to evacuate safely. Including you? Of course, she said, turning to leave. I suggest you do the same, Mr. Evans. In 5 minutes, every electronic device on this yacht will be fried by a high-voltage pulse, including surveillance systems and, things like pacemakers. I grabbed her wrist. Where's Sarah? Maya struggled against my grip, then sighed. Top deck. Mr. Vance left her a little parting gift. I let her go and bolted for the stairs. From behind me, Maya called out, Leo, she's not worth it. I didn't look back. The top deck was empty, save for the whistling wind. I frantically searched, finally spotting Sarah at the bow. She was being held by 2 large men. Standing before her was a man with graying temples. Arthur Vance. He looked older than in the photos, but he carried himself with an air of authority, dressed in an expensive sailing jacket and holding a tablet. Ah, our final guest, he said, noticing me. His voice was as gentle as if he were welcoming an old friend. Leo, isn't it? My niece is... New toy. Sarah struggled, a trickle of blood at the corner of her mouth. Run, Leo, run. Quiet, Arthur said, striking her across the face with the back of his hand. You have no manners. I charged forward, but a third guard appeared from the shadows and blocked my path. Arthur shook his head. Youth is always so impulsive. I could have had you killed, but my dear Sarah seems quite fond of you. It made me curious. What kind of man could possibly move my cold-hearted niece? A better man than you, I snarled. Arthur laughed. Brave. A shame she has such poor taste. Besides writing code, what else can this boy do? Sarah didn't answer, just stared at him with pure hatred. Arthur sighed and held up the tablet. Time is short. I've left a gift for you, my dear. All the evidence of the company's illegal activities, all pointing directly to you, of course. The screen displayed a montage of falsified documents and emails, all bearing Sarah's signature. They're forgeries, Sarah hissed. Of course they are, Arthur smiled. But they'll be enough to keep the police busy for the rest of your life, while I enjoy my retirement in a country with no extradition treaty. He hit send on the tablet, then let it drop into the dark water below. And with that, our time is at an end, he gestured to his men. Lock them in the storage hold. The pulse will trigger in 10 minutes. The guard dragged us down to the main cabin and threw us into a storage room, locking the door behind them. Sarah was immediately on her feet, scanning the small space. No windows, steel door, she said, shaking her head. We need explosives to get through. I checked my phone. No signal, just as Maya had said. Sarah produced a small tool from the heel of her shoe and began working on the lock. Your uncle, later, she said, her focus absolute. We have about 7 minutes. The lock was heavy-duty, and her tool snapped. Sarah swore and began ramming her shoulder against the door. I joined her, but it wouldn't budge. The air vent. I suddenly noticed a small grate near the ceiling. Sarah scrambled onto a stack of crates and pried the grate off. It's too small. I can fit, I said, sizing up the opening. There might be an emergency release outside. Sarah hesitated for a second, then nodded. I climbed up and squeezed into the narrow duct. The sharp metal edges tore at my shirt and skin, but I gritted my teeth and pushed forward. Around a bend, I could see the hallway below. I kicked at the grate with all my strength until it gave way, and I tumbled out onto the carpeted floor. My shoulder screamed in protest, but there was no time to check it. An emergency release panel was right next to the door, but it required a key card. I raced back up the stairs, hoping to find one of the unconscious guards. The top deck was deserted, but by the gangway, I found the guard Sarah had knocked out earlier. I snatched his key card and sprinted back to the lower deck. Time was running out, my own heart pounding in my ears. I swiped the card. A green light flashed. The moment the door opened, Sarah burst out. We have to jump. We ran to the nearest porthole. Sarah shattered the glass with a chair, and seawater began to pour in. She climbed out first, then reached back for my hand. We plunged into the icy water, swimming frantically toward the dock. Behind us, the Neptune's Folly let out a low thrum, followed by a shower of sparks. It wasn't an explosion, but the yacht's lights flickered and died, and black smoke began to billow from its windows. The dock was in chaos, guests screaming and running. We crawled onto the shore, soaking wet, and were immediately surrounded by Deacon and his team. Ma'am, Deacon said, handing us towels. Arthur Vance, he's gone, Sarah coughed. Speedboat, headed for a Panamanian freighter. Notify the Coast Guard. They've already sealed off this section of the coast, Deacon said, helping us into a waiting car. But he might have a backup plan. What about Maya? I asked. Vanished. Deacon shook his head. Marina surveillance showed her getting into a black Mercedes. Direction unknown. Back in the command vehicle, Sarah immediately demanded a laptop and a satellite phone. She made several calls, speaking in a clipped jargon I didn't understand. After hanging up, she slumped in her chair, her eyes falling on the wound on my shoulder. You're hurt, she said, her brow furrowed as she gently touched the torn fabric. It's just a scratch. I tried to downplay it, but the pain was sharp. Sarah insisted on cleaning the wound herself, her touch surprisingly gentle. I hissed when the antiseptic stung, and she paused. Just hold still. Your uncle. They'll find him. Her voice was cold. This time, I'm not giving him any chance to escape. The forged evidence can be disproven. It will just take time, she said, finishing the bandage. She leaned against me, suddenly looking exhausted. I'm sorry I dragged you into all this. I put my arm around her wet shoulders. I volunteer, remember? Sarah looked up at me, her eyes shining in the dim light of the car. She kissed me, a short but intense kiss. When this is all over, she whispered. When this is all over, I nodded. Deacon suddenly knocked on the window. Ma'am, the Coast Guard found the speedboat. It's empty. Sarah sat up straight. Searched the surrounding waters. He couldn't have just vanished. The next 24 hours were a nightmare. Arthur Vance had indeed vanished. The speedboat was found a few miles from the freighter's last known position, but no one knew if he had ever made it aboard. The ship's crew claimed to have never seen him. Maya Lin had also disappeared without a trace. The company was in turmoil. The board convened an emergency session. Based on the evidence Sarah provided, they temporarily froze all assets belonging to Arthur Vance and the deceased Marcus Thorne. The auditors uncovered a massive financial black hole, but the trail for most of the money had gone cold. On the third morning, I woke up on the sofa in Sarah's penthouse to find her gone. I found her on the balcony, dressed in a silk robe, staring out at the distant horizon. Didn't sleep? I asked, handing her a cup of coffee. She shook her head, taking the mug but not drinking. I'm trying to figure out where he would go. They'll find him. Maybe, Sarah sighed. You know, when I was a little girl, he took me to Disneyland. I ate 3 ice creams, threw up in his car, and he didn't even get mad. I didn't know what to say, so I just took her hand. I've hated him for so many years. Sarah's voice was as soft as a whisper. But right now, I just feel tired. The sun caught her face, and for the first time, I noticed the fine lines around her eyes, the exhaustion etched at the corners of her mouth. This titan of industry looked so utterly vulnerable. You should rest, I said softly. You've done more than enough. Sarah leaned her head on my shoulder and closed her eyes. We stood like that for a long time, listening to the distant crash of waves and the cry of gulls. The ringing of a phone shattered the peace. Sarah glanced at the caller ID and was instantly alert. Deacon. Ma'am, we found Maya Lin. Deacon's voice came through the speaker. In a warehouse down at the port. You should come see this for yourself. The warehouse was cold and damp, smelling of fish and diesel. Maya Lin lay on a makeshift cot in the corner, her face gray, and 4 drip attached to her arm. A fisherman found her this morning, Deacon said quietly. Severe dehydration, but she's alive. Sarah approached the cot. Maya's eyes fluttered open, her lips cracked and dry. Ms. Vance, who did this to you? Sarah asked. Maya gave a bitter smile and held up her left hand. The Aegis ring was gone. In its place was a raw, brutal wound, as if it had been forcibly torn from her finger. It never leaves loose ends, she rasped. But I hid something. She fumbled under her pillow and produced a tiny USB drive, holding it out with a trembling hand. All of it. The evidence. Account numbers. Passwords. It's all there. Sarah took the drive. Why? I loved him once. Maya closed her eyes. But he was going to kill me too. The paramedics carried Maya away. Sarah stared at the small drive in her hand, her expression unreadable. Is that enough to convict him? I asked. It's more than enough, Sarah said softly. Including for my parents' murder. Deacon hurried over. Ma'am, we just heard back from Interpol. Based on the information Maya provided, Arthur Vance may be on a fishing trawler bound for Myanmar. Notify them, Sarah said, her grip tightening on the USB drive. I want him brought back alive to stand trial, not die a martyr's death. On the drive back, Sarah was silent. It wasn't until we were almost home that she finally spoke. It's over. Yeah, my parents. They can finally rest in peace. I took her hand. And you? Can you rest? Sarah looked out the window, the morning sun glinting in the tears that filled her eyes. One day, when Interpol intercepted the fishing trawler off the coast of Myanmar, Arthur Vance was attempting to enter the country on a forged passport. According to the arresting officers, he offered no resistance, simply holding out his hands to be cuffed, as if he had been expecting this moment all along. The news reached me while I was debugging a new system in my office at Nexus Innovations. The email from Sarah was concise. Home at 7 tonight. News. 7 months had passed. The company had clawed its way back from the brink of scandal. The crimes of Marcus Thorne and David Chun were exposed, and Maya Lin, after turning state's witness, received a reduced sentence. Sarah had restructured the board, purging anyone with ties to her uncle. And I, to everyone's astonishment, had been promoted to Chief Technology Officer. My phone buzzed. A group message from the engineering team. Leo, the program for the holiday gala is in your inbox for approval. Leo, I still wasn't used to the title. When Sarah had pushed for my appointment at the board meeting, the backlash had been fierce. He's too inexperienced. He's just your boyfriend, isn't he? This will make the company a laughingstock. Sarah had silenced them all with a single statement. Leo identified the financial vulnerabilities, helped secure the key evidence against my uncle, and single-handedly stabilized the entire tech division after Marcus's arrest. If that doesn't qualify him, then you tell me who is better suited for the job. That night, I asked her if she'd taken too much heat for the decision. She just shrugged. I do what's right. I don't care what other people think. But I knew she cared. Deeply. Later, I found a hidden folder on her personal drive filled with every positive press mention of my technical achievements and glowing employee reviews, as if she were constantly reassuring herself that she'd made the right call. I replied to the email and checked the time, 6:30. Time to go. As I walked out of my office, a few programmers were chatting by the coffee machine. Heard the boss went to Arthur Vance's extradition hearing today. If you ask me, they should have just thrown that monster to the sharks. Chill. Leo's here. They fell awkwardly silent. I nodded as I passed, a swirl of emotions in my gut. Seeing Arthur brought to justice was a victory, but for Sarah, it meant facing the demon who had destroyed her childhood all over again. The lights were on in Sarah's penthouse. I typed in the code and pushed the door open, immediately smelling something. Burning? In the kitchen, Sarah was frantically waving a smoking pan. The counter was a chaotic landscape of oddly chopped vegetables and several open cookbooks. Are you cooking? I asked carefully. She spun around, a smudge of flour on her cheek. Obviously, she pointed at the pan. It just spontaneously combusted. I suppressed a laugh, walked over, turned off the heat, and doused the pan in the sink. What were you trying to make? Steak, she said, frowning at the piece of meat that now resembled a charcoal briquette. The recipe said medium rare. This looks more like well cremated, I said, picking up one of the books, Cooking for Dummies. Ambitious. Sarah glared at me, but there was no real heat in it. Shut up. The hearing was postponed. I wanted to celebrate. Celebrate what? The second quarter financials. Our stock price is back to pre-scandal levels, she said, handing me a glass of red wine. And my uncle is finally going to pay for what he did. We clinked glasses. The wine was rich and fruity. I noticed several small, fresh burns on her hands and gently took them to examine the damage. It's nothing, she said, trying to pull away, but I held on. 1 second, I said, heading to the bathroom to get the first aid kit. Sarah was surprisingly still as I applied burn cream. She winced when the ointment touched the raw skin, but didn't complain. How was the hearing? I asked. He was calm, she said, staring at her hands. He pleaded guilty to everything. He even admitted to murdering my parents. I looked up at her. Her expression was placid, but her eyes were shimmering with unshed tears. He said it was an accident. My father confronted him about the embezzled funds. They argued, and he pushed my father, who hit his head. My mother ran in to help, and he panicked. The bastard, I gritted out. He'll get the death penalty, Sarah said softly. In this state, multiple homicide is a capital offense. I didn't know what to say, so I just pulled her into a hug. She was stiff for a moment, then melted against me, her forehead resting on my shoulder. I thought I'd be happier, she said, her voice muffled. But I just feel empty. Revenge doesn't bring peace, I murmured, stroking her back. But at least your parents can finally rest. Sarah looked up at me and managed a small smile. When did my programmer get so philosophical? I learned from the best, I said, kissing the tip of her nose. Now, let me salvage this dinner. I reheated a pan, chopped vegetables, and scrounged through the fridge for usable ingredients. Sarah leaned against the counter, watching me, occasionally handing me a spice jar or tasting the sauce. You're really good at this, she commented. Coding and cooking are similar, I said, tossing vegetables in the pan. They both require precision, creativity, and patience. I lack the last one. You have plenty of other virtues, I said, tasting the soup and offering her the spoon. Try this. Sarah took the spoon, our fingers brushing. She took a sip, and her eyes widened slightly. That's good. Just simple home cooking, I said, turning back to the stove, but I felt her arms wrap around me from behind. Thank you, she whispered, for everything. Dinner was a success, if you ignored the carbonized steak. We sat on the balcony, drinking wine against the backdrop of the city skyline, talking about the company and the future. How's the gala planning going? Sarah asked. Moving along, I said, showing her the event schedule on my phone. The engineering team is doing a skit roasting some of the company's more bizarre policies. I hope I'm not in it. He coughed. There might be a minor character based on you. Sarah raised an eyebrow. I'm reviewing the script. Nope, that would ruin the surprise. I'm the CEO, and I'm the CTO, in charge of technology. And morale, I grinned. Sarah shook her head, but her lips curved upward. You've changed, Leo. You used to barely be able to string a sentence together around me. Yeah, well, now I talk back, I said, taking a sip of wine. It must be rubbing off on me. Sarah feigned grabbing a throw pillow to hit me, but just poured herself more wine instead. The night air was mild, the city lights like a galaxy spread out at our feet. I have an idea, Sarah said suddenly, about the company's future. I'm all ears. Nexus Innovations is too traditional, she said, her eyes taking on that familiar, strategic gleam. I want to spin off a new division, focused solely on AI and quantum computing. With you in charge. I put down my glass. Are you serious? Completely. You have the technical vision. I have the business acumen, she leaned forward. We could build something truly disruptive. I repeated the word, my heart speeding up. That sounds like a long-term partnership. Sarah suddenly looked away, fidgeting with her wine glass. Unless you have other plans. I don't, I said quickly. I absolutely don't. We looked at each other for a long moment, a silent conversation passing between us. Sarah was the first to break eye contact, picking up the wine bottle. More, please. Her fingers brushed mine as she poured. Was it intentional? Over the last few months, our relationship had shifted into a strange, undefined space. We'd gone from fake couple to partners in a life-or-death crisis, and now we were what? No one had said the words, but every night when I went back to my own apartment, the reluctance in her eyes was harder and harder to ignore. Sarah, I said, gathering my courage. Are we? My words were cut off by her phone ringing. Sarah frowned at the caller ID, but answered. Go ahead. A rapid-fire report came from the other end. Sarah's expression grew serious. When? Okay, keep monitoring the situation. I'll handle it tomorrow. Trouble? I asked. A minor issue, she said, putting her phone down. Someone in the Singapore office leaked some test data. Is it serious? Controllable. She stood up, abruptly changing the subject. Are you giving a speech at the gala? Yeah, a 5-minute department update. Make it 15 minutes, she said, walking toward her study. I need you to introduce the plan for the new AI division. Wait, just like that. Don't you need board approval? She looked back at me, a sly glint in her eye. I'm the chairwoman and CEO, remember? I shook my head and smiled. Tyrant. An efficient tyrant, she corrected, before disappearing into her study. On the night of the gala, the entire company was buzzing. The hotel ballroom was decked out in festive splendor. I stood awkwardly in my new suit, fiddling with a tie that felt like a python wrapped around my neck. Sarah walked over, breathtaking in a deep red evening gown, her hair swept up in an elegant chignon. She reached out and expertly adjusted my tie. Nervous? She asked in a low voice. A little, I admitted. I've never spoken in front of this many people. Just picture them all in their underwear. That would only make me more nervous. Sarah chuckled, squeezing my hand. You'll be great. The MC kicked off the event, and Sarah went on stage first. She confidently summarized the year's triumphs and tribulations, thanked the employees for their hard work, and then, at the end of her speech, she announced the new AI division. And this groundbreaking initiative will be led by our very own CTO, Leo Evans, she said, looking out at me. Please join me in welcoming him to the stage. I walked up to a round of applause and took the microphone. The stage lights were so bright I couldn't see anyone's face, which, strangely, helped me relax. Thank you, Sarah. I began, following the slides I prepared. Over the past year, despite extreme challenges the technology division has, the presentation went smoothly. I laid out the vision for the new division, our technology roadmap, and our recruitment plans. When I finished, the applause was much warmer than I'd expected. Finally, I said, hesitating for a second before deciding to go off script, I want to thank one person in particular. The room quieted. I looked over at Sarah in the wings. She had a slight frown, clearly not part of the plan. A year ago, I was just a regular programmer. I thought my entire career would be spent writing code in a cubicle. I took a deep breath. And then Sarah Vance crashed in my life like a hurricane and turned everything upside down. A wave of good-natured laughter and a few whistles rippled through the crowd. She taught me to be brave, forced me out of my comfort zone, and showed me how technology and business could come together to change the world. I paused. So, Sarah, thank you. Without you, none of this, not me, not this new division, would be possible. The applause erupted again. Sarah stood on the side of the stage, her expression a mixture of touched and mortified. I should have walked off stage then, but an impulse I couldn't control kept me rooted to the spot. Actually, I said, and the room fell silent again, there's one more thing. My hand went to my pocket, my fingers closing around the small velvet box. My heart was beating so hard I could barely hear anything else. Sarah, I said, dropping to one knee and opening the box. Will you? Oh my God! Sarah exclaimed from the side, her voice accidentally amplified by the mic. Are you serious? This is so cliché. The entire ballroom erupted in laughter. My face was on fire, but I held my position. I haven't finished asking yet. Sarah strode onto the stage and snatched the microphone from the stand. Our CTO has clearly been writing too much code. It short-circuited his brain. Then she turned to me and whispered, "Get up, you idiot." I remained stubbornly on one knee. Not until you answer. Sarah rolled her eyes, then leaned down and kissed me. It was a fierce, unequivocal kiss that left no room for doubt. The roar from the crowd was deafening. When she pulled away, she took the ring from my hand and slipped it on her own finger. Satisfied? Is that a yes? That's an if you don't get off this stage, you're fired, she said into the microphone, drawing another wave of laughter. But as she pulled me to my feet, she whispered 3 words in my ear, "Yes, I will." The rest of the night was a joyous, chaotic blur. Coworkers came up in droves to congratulate us, and champagne flowed freely. Sarah kept her hand in mine, the ring sparkling under the lights. You had this planned all along, didn't you? Bought the ring 3 months ago. I admitted. I was just waiting for the right moment. During a corporate presentation? How unoriginal. But it was unexpected, right? Sarah just snorted, but the corners of her mouth were turned up in a smile. I guess the whole world knows the CEO of Nexus Innovations is marrying her CTO now. Worried I'm marrying you for your money? No, she said, her expression suddenly serious. I'm the lucky one. Late that night, when we finally escaped the party and got back to her place, Sarah kicked off her heels and collapsed onto the sofa. I'm exhausted, she complained. We're canceling the gala next year. I second that. I said, loosening my tie and sinking down beside her. Though it went pretty well. The tech team Skip portrayed you as a kind-hearted CEO who secretly orders takeout for employees working late. Sarah raised an eyebrow. I have never. Artistic license. I grinned. And for the record, I hacked the system and deleted all the security footage of you yelling at people. You what? And that photo from the break room where your hair was a mess and you weren't wearing any makeup. Sarah sat up straight. Leo Evans, I'm going to bury you in the server room. Murdering your fiancé, domestic abuse on the first night of our engagement. She lunged at me, trying to throttle me, but it ended with both of us laughing, tangled up on the sofa. Her hair had come loose, the ring on her finger catching the light. I had never seen her look so relaxed, so genuinely happy. Seriously, though, she said, settling into the crook of my arm. Have you thought of a name for the new company? New company? Our AI company, she said, tracing circles on my chest with her finger. Nexus Innovations is too traditional. I want to start fresh, completely independent. When did you decide this? Just now, she said, looking up at me. Unless you don't want to. Of course I want to, I said, kissing her forehead. As for a name, what about Quantum Snow? Too poetic. Evans Vance Industries? Sounds like a chemical plant. I laughed. How about we just call it Ethel? Sarah considered it. Ethel. What do you spell that? A-E-T-H-E-L. It's an old word for noble. My programmer knows archaic words now, she teased. I Googled it, I admit it. I just searched for words that mean new beginning. Sarah laughed, and it was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. I like it. Ethel Labs, a provider of disruptive AI solutions. The CEO and CTO's offices have to be adjoining. With a connecting door, she added. We smiled at each other, seeing a shared future reflected in each other's eyes. A future not just of love, but of adventure, partnership, and limitless possibilities. From an ordinary programmer to the CTO, from the Iron Queen to a woman learning to love, we had changed each other. And this was only the beginning. Sarah leaned in and kissed my jaw. I love you, my code monkey. I love you too, my boss. Outside, the first light of a new day was breaking over the horizon. The end.